My name's John Harman, and I'm a writer and a scriptwriter, a ghostwriter. I lived in Australia for 10 years or so and love it. And I do quite a lot of teaching here for the UWA extension on how to be a creative writer. Well, you're interested in life and you're interested in people. More than anything else, I think that's the main thing, to be interested in people. And then you find a story that you want to tell. And the difference is, I think, that the story makes you alive. This is a story you have to tell. It consumes you. It's a bit like your first boyfriend or girlfriend. It really takes you over, and you start writing it, and you rewrite it, and then you write it again. And at the same time, you come to UWA extension courses, and you learn how to be a creative writer, and you learn the techniques of writing. Because a lot of people are quite good writers, but they fail on being storytellers. And there are lots of techniques in storytelling: how to structure a plot, how to create characters, how to write dialogue, and how to tell the story so it's interesting. And they're all techniques that you can learn, and UWA Extension teaches those, so that if you've got a good idea, you can start to develop it with courses and reading books, of course, and practice too. Well, you start with a storyteller, you start being a storyteller, and then you learn a facility with words. So the writer not only knows how to tell a story, but they love words, and they like to put the right word with the right word so that it creates emotion. A storyteller will tell a story, but the writer will be interested or really concerned about getting an emotion from you, so that you bury yourself in the story. So what I try and do is to say at the end of chapter 6, I want you to be in tears because it's very sad. I will write the story towards that. So I'll use the right words to create that emotion. If I want you to laugh, then I use the right words to make you laugh. So the writer goes beyond the storyteller. They take the story and then they get the person to be involved in it completely. Now, you always know a good writer because people say, well, I couldn't put it down, I just couldn't put the book down. And that's a good book. A lot of people talk about great literature, but if a book so beguiles you, so interests you that you can't put it down, then that's a good writer. Many people want to develop a creative streak, and they often feel that they can't do it because you've got to have a natural talent towards creativity. And some talent towards creativity is okay, but you can develop creativity. You can actually work on being more creative and developing your imagination. It really goes in 5 steps. The first step is that you have to be prepared to be creative, and that is you're interested in everything. And creative people are really interested in everything. They notice things. They keep their eyes and their ears open. What many people call living in the now, or creative people live in the now, so they're interested in everything. And then when they find the one area that they want to create in, no matter what it is, they focus and concentrate on that very hard, very hard. And after concentrating for a long while, what you do is, whatever it is, you walk away from it. You leave it, forget it. It's called incubation. So after concentration comes incubation, and you go and play tennis, or you go to the movies, you do anything to stop thinking about your particular project. And then after you've been away from it for a couple of hours, maybe even a day, no longer, you come back to it, and then often what happens is you get creative breakthroughs. You start to get the light bulb experience, illumination. Oh, wait a minute, I can do this, I can do that. That's when the subconscious is coming through. In my view, the subconscious is a bit like a compost heap. It will always work. You put a seed into it and something will sprout. You don't know whether it's going to be an onion or a daffodil, but you know that if you put a thought into the subconscious, it'll come out. And it will never fail. So once you've had this illumination, this breakthrough in the subconscious, that's the time after that when you have to verify that this idea is really going to work. So what the writer does, having had the breakthrough of the story idea, then you've got to see whether you can write it, whether you can employ all the techniques of creativity to make it work. So it's right brain, creativity and imagination, and then it's left brain, and that is a technical understanding of how to make the words work and how to make the writing work. That's in writing, but it would be the same with painting or sculpture or dance or any of the creative arts. Writing technique comes down to about 4 or 5 areas. I talked about story technique, which is plot and character and dialogue. Writing technique rests really on phraseology, the words you use, and then what they call syntax. I bet you didn't know you paid tax on it, did you? But it's SYN, syntax, and that's the order of the words and the narrative mode, what you can do to tell the story. You've got action or thought or dialogue, description. So the writer is always making decisions as to which one of those they use and which words they use to make them work. And the other thing is analogy, because writers are always looking to see whether they can make one thing appear like something else. The great thriller writer, the American thriller writer Raymond Chandler, said to a writer, everything is like something else. And so we're always looking for fresh, interesting metaphors and analogies of making, and when you find an analogy like somebody's a lion in battle, well, that's a metaphor. It's very cliched now, but when you find a fresh one, then you really want to use it, and the writer's always looking for those. I was maybe 7 or 8, I just learnt to read, and I read a children's detective story where the person who solved the crime was a journalist. And I thought, that's marvellous. You could solve crimes without being a cop. You could be a journalist and solve crimes. And so the idea of somebody who was paid to write got into my brain very early when I was 7 or 8. And I loved to read, and then at school I liked to write like so many of us do. And I was lucky in that I got a scholarship to a good school. I was working class, so I'd have never been able to afford it, or my parents wouldn't have been able to afford it. And they concentrated a great deal on writing at this school. So I always had a love of words, I always had a love of story, and I liked being a journalist in London in the 70s. That was a lot of fun. It was pretty hairy. I worked on Fleet Street, but it was a whole lot of fun. There are only 2 kinds of writer. There are bad writers, and there are writers trying to get better. There are no good writers. There are only those of us who are trying to get better, and any great writer will tell you that.